Hello everyone, it's your boy Robert here, and today I'm going to show you a typical studio or bachelor apartment in China. Now this apartment is owned by my wife and it's in the same building that we live, and it's on floor 46. Now this apartment isn't very big, it's only 46 square meters big. However, it's made by a company called Country Garden, and they usually sell their apartments or advertise themselves as a 5-star residential company. Now if you walk in, you'll find some storage cupboards. There's nothing too interesting here. There we go, you can put shoes and hang your clothes there. Over here to my right side you've got the bathroom. Now the bathroom is not very big, but it's got some winter lights here where you can keep yourself warm. It's got a shower there, and it's got a modern Western toilet. Now most toilets in China is just basically a porcelain hole in the ground, so at least this is a better toilet, and there's a wash basin. Then yeah, we've got the living room slash bedroom. Now apartments in China usually come fully decorated, so you'll pay more for that. Now it's got a couch here, it's got a little coffee table, it's got a bed here with some storage underneath that. Here's a big screen TV as well with a TV stand. And then there in that corner you've got a makeup table. Now this box here is for the internet connection or for cable for TV if you want that. Now I'm going to show you the laundromat, and that comes with a washing machine for your clothes. And what's cool is it's got a wash line here that you can bring down using this hook here, up and down with this thing over here. Alright, and now we are on the outskirts of the city, so you can see there's the countryside, but behind the building you'll find the city itself. So this is where the city abruptly ends, and then there's a little temple there at the bottom, and then the Laodao River. So the view is not too bad. And now yeah, we've got the gas meter and a gas boiler, so all your utilities you pay for online: gas, water and electricity. And this is the kitchen. It's also got a view here, same view as in the laundry room. Got a little kettle here. This is, most apartments come with this machine. It's a disinfector. It uses heat and UV light or something to kill all the bacteria, but it's not a dishwasher. Then there's a gas stove here and a basin. And then of course yeah, you have some storage space, and then this is a ventilation for when you cook. And over there we've got fire alarms and sprays for in case there's a fire. And that's the video, and if you want to, you can carry on watching. I will explain some real estate rules in China. Hi there. Today I'm going to be talking about the complicated rules of real estate in China. Now a quick disclaimer before I start. I'm going to be talking about the rules from a Changsha point of view, because that's the city where I live in. The information that I got is generally from my own experience, from talking to friends and family and doing some of my own research online. I am not going to be talking about politics. I just want to talk about the rules so that you can understand a little bit about how things work in China regarding real estate. Now the most important thing to keep in mind in China is that nobody can own land. The government owns all the land in China. So whether you are a Chinese citizen or a foreigner, you cannot own land. Essentially what you have to do as a person is you have to lease the land from the government. So you have different type of leases. You have a 40-year lease, a 50-year lease, a 60-year lease and a 70-year lease. Now, the time frame of the lease usually depends on the type of property you are talking about. You have commercial, manufacturing, and residential. Today we're going to be talking about residential property. So that usually falls under the 70-year lease. Now, the rules of a lease can be very complicated because 70 years is a very long time. Usually someone will die or they'll want to sell their house before the lease is up. So we're going to talk about that really quickly. If you have a house and the 70-year lease is up, the government can take away the house without compensating you. But usually they don't do this. They will give you the option to pay a small amount of money and they will renew the lease for you. And then you can keep it for another 70 years. Fair enough. If you want to sell your property, then you can do so, but you're not allowed to do it 4 years after you've bought the property. So if you buy a property, you have to wait 4 years and only then you can sell it. When you sell the property, of course, your lease is null and void, but the next person will have their lease with the government for 70 years. If you do die, your spouse or your children or whoever can inherit your property. I'm not sure yet if they have to finish your lease or if they get a new restarted lease from the government. So if you know the answer to that, please leave an answer in the comments below. Now, there's something else to keep in mind, and that's if the building that your apartment is in gets too old and it needs to be demolished. What happens to your property? Okay, so this is a very complicated situation. Buildings often don't last longer than 100 years, especially when we talk about skyscrapers in China. Buildings here get broken down all the time and new buildings get built. So who destroys the buildings? Who builds them? These are companies. Now, the government works very closely with the companies that are privately owned, but the government sets all the rules for these companies. You need to know that the government sets the rules of when a building should be demolished. They set the market price as well. So, say a company wants to buy a bunch of skyscrapers, they want to destroy it, they will go to the government and they'll pitch their idea to the government. The government will say, yes, okay, no problem. Those buildings are unsafe, they are dangerous, they are old. The government will first buy the property back from you at the market price that they set. Usually, from what I understand, it's a fair market price. Then they will lease the land to the company, and then the company will destroy the buildings and build new buildings, and then they will sell the apartments at the market price that the government sets. So, if you are watching this video, there's a fair chance that you're a foreigner and that you are interested in real estate in China. Let's say you are a foreigner anywhere in the world and you want to own property in China. The number one rule is for a foreigner in China, you are only allowed to own one property. So that's one apartment or one house. You are not allowed to borrow money from the bank. So, if you are a foreigner and you want to buy a house in China, you have to buy the house cash and you are only allowed to buy one. Okay, so let's say you are a foreigner like myself that is married to a Chinese citizen. If you guys together want to buy a house but borrow money from the bank, that is allowed. But there's only one bank that will do this, and that's the China Construction Bank. Now, in Changsha, they've brought out a new rule that as a person, you're only allowed to own one apartment. But if you are a married couple, you are allowed to have 2 apartments. That's whether you are both Chinese or a foreigner and a Chinese, it doesn't matter. Now, the reason for this is because in Changsha is the provincial capital of the Hunan province. But it's a city where the property is very cheap. Now, what the government of China wants to do is they want to stop people from monopolizing the real estate markets and conglomerating wealth. So to discourage this behavior, they have set rules about who is allowed to buy property in Changsha. Now this rule only applies to Changsha. So the problem is that my wife already owns 2 very small apartments. So that means we are not allowed to buy apartments. We're not allowed to buy any more apartments. However, there is another alternative that a person or a married couple can take if they want to own more than 1 or 2 properties. And that is to buy a house online through a platform called Alibaba. Now, Alibaba is an online platform that most of you might have heard of. They sell everything online, from cars to small products, nationally and internationally. Now, what will happen is the bank will repossess a house from someone. Then this house will be listed on Alibaba. Now, this house will have a date for a viewing where people can go and view the house, and then it'll have a separate date for when the house will be open for bidding, when it will officially go on auction. And then, of course, the person who's willing to pay the highest price will get the house. Also keep in mind that these houses also fall under the 70-year lease, so same rules apply. So why is this allowed, you wonder? Well, the answer is simple. The government owns all the major banks in China. So if the banks lose money, the government loses money. If the banks make money, the government makes money. So, of course, this benefits the government. But at the same time, it also benefits people like myself and my wife who really want to buy a 3rd house or a family home. Now, as I said earlier before, the government doesn't want too many people to own too much property. Now, there are 2 reasons for this. The first reason is the government doesn't want people to accumulate too much wealth too quickly. And the second reason is the government doesn't want the property market to be disrupted. Now, the government can control the market price of apartments and houses via the companies and via the banks who have to follow the government rules. However, when we talk about privately owned houses by people, the rules don't apply. So for example, if I own an apartment, but someone really wants to buy the apartment from me because they like the view or they like the layout of the apartment, I can sell it to them for the price that I want. And if they don't want to buy it, then it's their loss. Okay, so the government wants to avoid this situation. Now, there's one way that the government makes it a little bit more difficult for people to have too many properties. And it's quite a fair system. If you are a single person or a married couple and you want to buy your first house, then the bank will lend you 65% of the money and the rest will be your deposit. But if you want to buy your second apartment, the bank will lend you 55% of the money and the rest will be deposit. But if you want to buy your third property, the bank will only lend you 45% of the money and then the rest of the money will be your deposit. So the bank will borrow you or lend you less and less money the more properties you do get. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the demographics of property and people in China. Now, as you all know, China's economy is a fast-growing economy. And the reason for this is because the government's always busy with big infrastructure construction projects and also residential construction projects. It's also important to keep in mind that the government owns a lot of companies in China. So for example, the government owns and subsidizes many steel and concrete companies. And this makes concrete and steel very cheap in China, and this allows the companies to build many buildings very quick and very affordable in China. However, this doesn't mean that apartments and houses are cheap in China, because the government sets the property market. But they do this for good reason, because the companies need to make money, the banks need to make money, and the government needs to make money. Now, this has created an unintentional vacuum in China, where most of the people live in lower class areas with an occupancy rate of about 80 to 90%, and you have fewer people living in middle and upper class areas with an occupancy rate of between 40 to 60%. And the reason for this is because most people simply can't afford the properties at the current market price, because they are not earning as much money. So for example, let's look at my wife's studio apartment. This apartment is worth about 800,000 RMB. However, you can only rent it out for about 1,500 RMB a month if you're lucky. That means you'll only pay the apartment back after 40 years. Now, that's not a very good investment compared to Western standards. Now, of course, over the years the rent will go a little bit higher, but investing in property in China is like rolling the dice, because rent is very cheap. If you've looked at some of my other videos that I've made on my channel, you'll see that the rent is very, very, very cheap. But when you want to buy these houses, they are extremely expensive. Now, if you want to rent out your apartment, the competition is tough because so many other people want to rent out their apartments. So China is really a market for the renter, but not really a market for the buyer or the seller. So I wouldn't discourage anyone from buying a house in China. There are benefits from buying a house in China, but you really have to be very careful, and you really have to be aware of the rules and the regulations. I personally would never buy an apartment from a company that hasn't even finished building the apartment. I wouldn't encourage buying an apartment in a very old building. So if you know the rules and the regulations about the lease, and you are aware of the banks and the companies and the government's rules, it's not necessarily that bad. But you can decide for yourself whether you want to buy or just rent in China. Thank you for watching my movie. Bye.